Friends, allies, and Americans, welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast, where we tell the stories of folks who defend your children's rights by advocating for inclusive public school systems and who fight for diversity across our nation. I'm your host, Karen Swoboda. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast. It has been a minute. This is Karen Swoboda, and I'm so happy to be back on the air today. I am having a conversation with a good friend and a wonderful volunteer, Addison K. Witt. Addison, I want to introduce you to our audience as the newly nominated Poet Laureate of Defense of Democracy, in addition to many other things. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Karen.
Addison came onto my radar through a TikTok that I had, been in the right algorithm at the right time, I guess. And I saw this person reading this wonderful poem that was called Thumbs Up at Arlington. And it wasn't just the words of the poem, but it was the way that it was read. Somebody who really knows how to read a poem is Addison. And so, we formed this relationship, and it's allowing, among other things, it's allowing us to relaunch our podcast because, Addison, you have graciously accepted to help hosting this podcast for Defense of Democracy. So a lot of things to unpack in the next 30 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to you. First of all, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your involvement with Defense of Democracy?
Yes, thank you. First of all, it has been what an incredible surprise and new addition to my life that I was certainly not expecting at all. And so often when you're on TikTok and other social media platforms, you hear content creators reinforce the importance of posting. Just post. Go ahead and post. Get it out there. Whatever you have to say or want to communicate, just do it. And I had been putting off for some time writing. I had largely been a voyeur on TikTok, just doom scrolling and watching everyone else. And when I finally made this post and it took off the way that it did, it has opened the doors in so many ways, and speaking engagements and other things that I'm getting to do, and working with you, the film festival, and becoming Poet Laureate. And so it has been an incredible journey and undertaking, which I'm really thrilled about and excited to move forward with this. I'm from Texas originally, to answer your initial question. From Texas, I grew up listening to this incredible teacher, seventh grade English teacher, that read to us every Friday, and she would read Edgar Allan Poe. She would read Uncle Remus tales and stories and lots of books, and she would do so with this incredible voice. She had amazing vocal ability, and she and her husband had spent time as missionaries in Indonesia. And she would tell us often about the stories there of what she experienced. But every student in that school looked forward to getting into her class, her English class, and listening to her read those stories. And that had a profound impact on me and storytelling and reading. And it has followed me my entire life.
So Addison, I think, I was hoping, so the poem and the poem that really brought you to my attention was that Thumbs Up at Arlington. And I was wondering, I thought it would be so nice to start off the podcast with you reading that poem. So I was hoping you'd consider doing that for us today.
I would love to. As a matter of fact, I wasn't 100% sure, so I kept it nearby. I have a reading coming up here in Dallas on August 23rd. So I've been working on it and preparing for that. But I would love to read this to you, Thumbs Up at Arlington. And if you'd like, we can talk a little bit about its inception. Yeah. All right, here we go. Thumbs Up at Arlington. He stood among the stones of white where heroes rest in endless night. But in his eyes no reverence shone, no horror in his heart was known. He, the man who speaks so loud, who wears his arrogance like a shroud, could not perceive the sacred ground where valor lost is ever found. He talks of strength, of might, of pride, but in his soul there's naught inside, no understanding of the pain of those who've borne the war's harsh strain. At Arlington, where silence reigns, he failed to feel the soldiers' chains that bind them to this hallowed place in service, in death, in honor's grace. He stepped on graves as if they were but stones beneath a man's cruel stir, his thumbs raised high as though he'd won a game, a match, a war undone. But this is not his playground here. No boxing ring, no crowd to cheer. This is where the brave lie still, where sacrifices pay the bill. He doesn't know the meaning true of giving all, of seeing through a promise made to country's call, to stand, to fight, to risk it all. He's never faced the battle's heat, nor felt the drum of war's hard beat. He speaks of power, deals, and fame, but has no sense of duty's claim. The military, always proud and tall, now whispers low a mournful call. Remove this man, this petty king, who knows not what our honor brings, for in his reign there's only scorn for those who've bled, for those who've borne the weight of freedom's fragile thread, while he steps lightly on the dead. It's time, they say, to end this farce, this tour failure, void and sparse, for leadership is more than might. It's knowing when to serve the right. He's shown the world his shallow side, his thumbs up high, his lack of pride. But history will judge him true as one who never really knew that sacrifice is not a game. It's not a prop. It's not for fame. It's what the brave have always known, that freedom's cost is not their own. So let him fade, let him depart, with all his bluster, all his art, for in the end it's clear to see he's never grasped what it means to be an American with duty's call, to rise, to stand, to give it all. He'll be remembered, not for might, but for the darkness in his light.
I mean, wow. I just chills. I mean, I'm that some of those lines he wears his arrogance like a shroud. Wow. Wow.
It was so funny because, as I said, I was listening to the TikTok content creators, and I had originally written, which was a large part of this here, it was written as a scene, and some of the lines, a scene and a monologue, and I was trying to convey what the Supreme Court had just granted, this complete immunity. And I thought that was such an outrage, and I was trying to contextualize it and put it into words. And and then he went to Arlington. And you know how in many, many cultures it is considered the height of disrespect to walk across graves, to stand on top of a grave. And I saw him do that. And I've had many family members who have served going back to the Civil War. And it just shook me, and it did something to me because I thought, here we have a leader who has never served in the military and therefore lacks some of the decorum, the respect of servicemen and service people and what they've done. And something as small as we understand across all types of cultures, how disrespectful that is. And yet he is completely oblivious. And I thought about young people that were watching that, and to see a leader do that, it
Mm,
sends a signal and a message to children who
mhm.
then will not grow up with the same. kind of respect because it is so easily discarded and dismissed. That's what really struck me at my core.
And the title of the poem it is "Thumbs Up at Arlington."
Yes.
It's you're referring to an incident in 2024 where Donald Trump was at Arlington Cemetery and used it as a photo shoot, and that, I don't know, so that tacky kind of like, here I am by a fallen soldier's, like, it's horrifying to even think of how that was minimized and used as a prop, right?
That's exactly right. And so I wound up writing it, shaping it, and I thought, you know what, I will just put this one out. In
Mm.
fact, it was the very first significant post I had sent out, and I didn't think much of it. I just did it in an afternoon, and that was that. And the next day I wake up and there's the ding, 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 and
Yeah,
I'm like, what's going on?
it
I,
resonated.
it
I mean,
really did.
really.
It really did.
So, and this is why, I'm very much a person to kind of follow my gut, right? With organizing defensive democracy, it just seems like there's so many opportunities to promote what this country is supposed to mean, and and inviting you, and you had, a very interesting tenure before you became the poet laureate of defensive democracy, in that you were helping to organize our national film festival event. You became something of a spokesperson, and then when that really important and critical role that you played in putting together our film festival, um, was over, I really felt that there was something more to invite you to participate in. And I was so happy when you accepted that, the role of poet laureate, because I believe, and I'd like you to speak to this a little bit, but I believe that it is our poets, our storytellers, our artists who are so critical in this moment in being able to communicate the and inspire people to stand up against this encroaching tide of fascism, right?
Yes.
So tell me, as a poet, as a storyteller, how you see the role of individuals with those gifts in our country right now.
I I so love seeing the poets rise right now because we're
Mm,
seeing them from shore to shore, and certainly here in America, the poets are coming out in force. And the thing about poetry that is so remarkable is that it can bypass armor and it can indict, lament, uplift, all in the same breath,
mm,
and it is its own form of resistance. And I've been writing poetry to one degree or another, and I think I was first published in high school,
mhm,
and I never took it seriously. It was just something that I occasionally did. I worked as an actor and so many other areas, but I found in times of crises I would return to poetry. And for instance, during the great pandemic of 2020, I would read a poem every night online as a way of speaking to the situation, either referencing similar pandemics in times gone by, or hopefully inspiring some kind of hope and belief in our future. And so that was always a part of my identity. And then as I committed more to writing and putting out poetry, people started using the term poet laureate, and perhaps that could be a direction for the United States. And so I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I've never really thought about that, but I started doing a deep dive on previous poet laureates, their poems, how they resonated, what they had to say, and really understanding that in context. So when you brought that to me, it had been working in the ether to some degree of being on a more national platform and
mm,
using poetry as a way to to resist, to communicate, And during this time where we are fighting for our country, for our lives, for liberty, for each other, it became incredibly important to use this type of platform for myself. I've been my entire life, people have called me poetic justice,
Hmm.
and usually because we're in a conversation and I speak in a particular rhythm and cadence, and it has always been noted, and of course I was an actor and creative writer, and so but I've always had a bent for politics, for what is right, for the future of our country, realizing that, yes, we have not lived up to the possibilities, but we are a work in progress.
Mhm.
And as long as we're all working together, we, at some point, the collective, we are going to get there. So to take on this role now, it is super important to me to not only use my own voice as a poet to communicate what I believe in, but to amplify others and their work. There's so many, as I've been doing more research and learning and leaning into the various voices, and each has their own way of communicating, a particular focus
Mhm.
that is important to them, and yet all of us are really talking about the same thing: liberty,
Yes.
freedom, rights, uplifting each other, and resistance as necessary. So it's important to elevate these voices, other books that people are writing, and use poetry in unique ways and different ways that we might not have thought of before. Whether it's also using, I've come out recently with a T-shirt line where I've put a couple of phrases on
Mhm.
T-shirts, and just bringing it into people's lives in a day, in sort of an everyday way. You know,
Mhm.
even the people who, one of the things I love is that people who do not read poetry per se often say to me, I get it. I understand it in a way that I've never understood it before. And if we can reach more people and get them to understand that there's something that's resonating inside of each of them,
Mhm.
and we can communicate this with them, I think we will continue to build coalitions of people that
Right.
are advocating for the best interests of our country in a real way.
So, Addison, about we are about halfway through the podcast. It's amazing how quick these go, and always kind of at this midpoint. I like to do a shout out to a volunteer or someone who is connected to Defense of Democracy who really did some standout work. And since you, having worked on our film festival in the spring, were really connected to so many amazing people, I was hoping you could maybe talk a little bit about um, someone involved in the film festival.
I would love to. That festival, going into the festival, I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen or how it was going to take off because it was already existing. And you had a festival the year prior, and I was just bringing my vision. And one of the early producers that I had the pleasure of talking to was Jennifer Wiggin, and her film is Band Together, which ultimately won the title position in the festival. And I was so excited when we talked about it that I watched that film the very night that I started to volunteer.
I
I was
wish everybody would seriously. When I saw that film, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is my volunteer training. Like this is exactly what we want people to do."
It was so good, and I was so blown away, and I thought, "Oh, wow, I'm so glad that I'm a part of this," because that film just told the story so beautifully, and each of the young people had this incredible passion, and they were so well spoken and driven. And I also noted that their parents were incredibly supportive because none of us can do any of this alone. and to have the parents that also back them up and yet allow their voices to be amplified. And so I thought Jennifer and her team, I in fact wrote her. I wrote her immediately the next day to tell her how much I loved that film before I had a chance to see all the others. And there were many that were very good, and a team of producers and filmmakers that I have often said I kind of fell in love with them all because of what they were doing. But I felt that Jennifer and her team really soared, and what they're doing on behalf of democracy and getting the word out and pushing their story and that narrative and elevating young people and sounding the alarm while
Mhm.
also educating us was just incredible. I love what they
Agreed.
did.
I think that that is a wonderful person to give a shout out to. If anybody is looking for the film again, you just Google Band Together. Interestingly, several of our volunteers actually make appearances in the film. They're not identified as Defense of Democracy, but we were all excited because we knew that's Paul, that's Amy, that's so and so.
Right.
So really, really exciting to see that, and I think that was an excellent choice for the shout out today. Okay, so let's talk. We have about 10 minutes left, so let's talk a little bit about your vision for the podcast, because I was having all of these amazing conversations, and now that you are kind of assisting, um, if you had, your dream of who to invite to join the podcast and talk to you, who are you looking to speak to when you interview them?
So I had a chance to listen to quite a few of your conversations, and one of my absolute favorites was Richard Blanco.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that. Oh my goodness, he's
One
amazing.
of my faves. And as a matter of fact, I was writing down ideas. I thought, oh, she's already talked with Richard Blanco and recently. And so, however, I decided to look up all poet laureates in the United States, those that are living,
Wow.
and made a list. And I've already started reaching out to some of them because I thought, oh, that would be good because there's so many great people to talk to. And I definitely want to speak to people who have a national presence and platform, if not international, where, because in part, we are elevating um, the defense of democracy during a most critical time. And
Mhm.
so those voices that are on the front lines, that and some are go about it because poetry doesn't require you to shout, right?
Right. Right.
and
That's a good way of
and
putting
yet
it.
it is powerful, and a phrase can really impact a person. And so um I've reached out to Amanda Gorman. And yes, and I've just been looking around at other people, filmmakers. I'm
Yep.
super excited to talk with filmmakers about the work that they're doing. I've been, in fact, even now preparing for next year's podcast, looking at a lot of documentaries right now
Okay.
and becoming more in tune with what people are saying. And so those are also people that I'm interested in talking to.
And I mean, I think that's why I use the term storytellers, because that could be an artist, that can be a musician, it can be somebody who dances. I mean,
That's
there's so
right.
many ways to fight to protect our constitutional republic, right?
That's
And
right.
the principles of democracy upon which it was built, and do it in a way that is subtle enough to irk those in power, right? With really empowering those who need that message.
100%. Historians is another one
Oh
that
yeah.
I'm super excited about, because they have a way of making clear precedent and
Mhm.
why we do things the way that we do. And, things change, life evolves, and we all get that and understand that. But at the same time, there is still a system that has worked well, and you don't break the system, you enhance it. And so I'm looking forward to just a wide range of people who can bring interesting perspectives.
You know, let me ask you this. When you're talking to other fellow poets and artists, um, what is the sense that you're getting? Because a lot of what I'm getting often is really kind of this roller coaster of, gosh, something really amazing happened, or you know what, the bad guy got tripped up. Don't you love that?
Yeah.
And then like just this kind of almost immediately, there's always some news that just is like just um, will hit you right in your heart, right? And it'll just be bad news, and it's so discouraging, and you just want to throw in the towel and just disappear for a year until or 3 years or whatever.
Yes.
Um, how like what's your sense within other artists within the community of how they're keeping themselves going? Are they keeping themselves going? How do you keep
Y-
your head above water?
Honestly, there's a lot of fear, and a lot of people are concerned. And I think part of the concern is that usually there are very specific leaders in power that you can use as a go-to person, and they help us feel that everything is going to be okay.
Hmm.
But right now, particularly in the Democratic Party, there are a lot of great individual people that are speaking out and standing up and fighting, but not one specific person that everyone looks to per se.
Yeah.
And so it requires each of us now to, in essence, become the leader that we're looking for. And so by connecting with people and going to events, and one of the reasons why I'm doing the readings and so forth is because people are gathering in a way to find hope and
Hmm.
to connect with others. I was listening to Letitia James, the AG for New York State earlier, and
Hmm.
I've heard her say a number of times, "We will not be afraid. We will not stop. We will not capitulate. We will not give in. We're
Hmm.
going to stand up. We are prepared." And I've taken that within myself as well. And when I speak to filmmakers in on the West Coast and people that I know who express to me that they're concerned and what do we do, I reinforce that. And oftentimes at the end of the conversation, they feel empowered. And
Hmm.
so I think it's a matter of reminding all of us we are in it together, and resistance doesn't look the same for everyone. Whatever you are doing, even supporting others, even building up your inner resolve and determining that you're not going to be afraid. This is our hour. This is
Yes.
our time. And so we have to stand up. We are called to. So
Hmm.
I'm super excited to lend that voice to whoever and to everyone that will join in. And I see people waking up, whether it's on school boards, whether it is what's happening now with the Epstein files, and people are coming out from under this
Yeah.
melees. You know, it doesn't have to be everyone all at the same time. And if we have to do one, two, 10 at a time, then that is what we're going to do.
100%. And I agree with that. And I have built this whole organization on that principle
Yeah,
that if one person stands up, 10 people will stand up,
that's
right?
right.
Because we sure don't have the money.
Yeah, yeah,
And we don't have the platform, but we do have the numbers. And
that's right.
I love what you say is that the everybody's resistance might look a little different from the next person.
Yes,
So my level of resistance is I'm putting my face on things, right? You're putting your face on things, like, but not everyone can do that. Some
that's right.
people, it's a $5 donation,
That's right.
because financially we certainly need it because we don't have that money, and we are supported by these individual donations. Some people help behind the scenes on some of our tech equipment. I mean, bringing us all together, which is another reason why Defense of Democracy, we have these regular calls every Tuesday night. They're informative. We do workshops, but they're part support group, really, in a lot of ways, getting encouragement from each other, feeling like we're part of a family, we're part of a real strong resistance. um, so, Addison, I always like to end the podcast on a positive note. So I would just like to ask you, can you share something that you're looking forward to in the coming weeks? It can have something to do with the podcast, it can have something to do with your personal life. And by all means, please let people know how they can find out a little bit more about you.
Thank you. So, in the coming weeks, August is going to be a very busy month. I have a couple of speaking engagements that are coming up locally here in Dallas. I have a book signing and reading at a local bookstore here, and signing up to do others. So that's super exciting to really get out and reach people,
Yeah.
and so that is very encouraging, and and also just to see so many people that are taking a stand. I'm loving that, and I, check the wins when wherever they are. As for finding me, and there are a couple of different ways. I have my website, siraddisonwitt.com, has my stand store and all the other links that are there. My book, I Stand with the Soul of America,
Mm.
was published on Amazon, and so it's there, which is also on my website. I've written a couple of ebooks that are on my website. So it's just really getting information out there that's gonna, I think, be helpful to people and encouraging for sure during this time of challenge and also awakening.
Addison, thank you so much for joining the Defense of Democracy podcast, agreeing to be the Poet Laureate for Defense of Democracy, and for also agreeing to be our podcast host as needed. And I deeply appreciate all the work you've done. Thank you so much for joining me on the call today.
Thank you, Karen, and it has been absolute and remains to be an absolute pleasure.